Our next session is going to take a look at a very, very important part of cryptology, and that is computers. And it was one of our speakers, Jim Boone, who helped draw my attention to the very close connections that developed between the development of the computer industry and the field of cryptology. Our first speaker, however, is very special, someone who played a role in making all of this happen. Captain James Pendergrass, retired from the U.S. Navy. He had an MA in mathematics, earned an MA from mathematics at Columbia University. He joined the Navy in 1941, and after an initial tour was assigned to Op 20G to work on the Enigma. He retired from the Navy in 1965, again with the rank of captain. After retirement, he worked for the Institute for Defense Analysis and the Center for Communications Research. He's author of one of the most influential documents of its time, a critical landmark in the development of the modern computer. And he is joined today by many members of his family, including his wife, Jean, his son, Bill, and his daughter-in-law, Shane, who is a delegate to the State Assembly in Annapolis. His daughter, Nancy, is here, and he has two grandsons as well, Aaron and Ian. So before we begin, I was wondering if the Pendergrass representatives in the audience could stand for a round of applause. And it is with great pleasure, Captain Pendergrass, that I welcome you to the Cryptologic History Symposium.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I can live up to all of the talk, but I'm going to make it my personal history. I was there. As the speaker said, I got a MA at Columbia. I had a BA at Cornell and an MA at Columbia in 1941. I did an extra year, 1941, and I was young and healthy, and I knew I was going to be in the war. So, although I went for the other year, I looked around during that year, and I found on the 5th floor of the building at Columbia, Pupin Hall, was a professor of physics who was looking for volunteers for a commission in the U.S. Navy. Well, this sounded much better than being a private in the Army. So I went up there. I also checked out the 90-day wonder period. You probably don't know that expression, but back in that time, 1941, there was a program that college graduates could be midshipmen for 90 days and go to sea and learn, and if they passed the test, they got commissioned as ensigns. I considered this, but the physics professor on the 5th floor was more persuasive, and that I could get a direct commission. And he mentioned something about aeronautical engineering. Well, I was a pure mathematician. I didn't know anything about engineering. But he said, I'll put your name in. Well, damned if I didn't get a letter telling me to, or requesting that I submit my application, and I did. And I was accepted. The first thing I had to do was to go to, of all things, a refresher course in aeronautical engineering. I was a pure mathematician, and anything practical in mathematics was foreign to me. But I went, and it was 6 weeks long, and we had our commissions. And on Friday afternoons, we were taught how to be military officers by a reserve lieutenant commander from the 3rd Naval District. So I took this course, and I passed the final exam. After 6 years of college, I knew how to pass exams when I didn't know very much. And I also was asked where I wanted to go, where I wanted to be assigned. Well, I was 22 years old. I had graduated from Cornell at age 20, master's degree at Columbia, 21, and this was my next year. I was 22. What young, single 22-year-old doesn't want to go to Hawaii? That was my first choice. My second choice was Bermuda. That sounded pretty good. You probably may have read or remembered that Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Churchill made an agreement before we were officially at war that we would give the British 40, quote, overage destroyers, and in return, they would give us permission to build bases in Argentia Bay, Newfoundland, Bermuda, and someplace in the West Indies. So Bermuda was building. Well, believe it or not, I got my second choice, Bermuda. So with some fear and trembling, I reported to the 5th Naval District in Norfolk, FFT. You have to learn Navy speak to be in the Navy. FFT is for further transportation to Bermuda. So I cooled my heels on Virginia Beach. This was around the 1st of October, late, after the big tourist season. Well, that was pretty good. And then I checked in every day by telephone. And finally, they said, after a week or so, we've got transportation, report so-and-so. And I was put on to the USS Ranger, which was an aircraft carrier, as a passenger. And it was on a training cruise that was going down, training new pilots. And I had the great pleasure of standing on the deck and watching them land and take off from a carrier, which was something that most people don't have a chance to do. But I got there, and there were 3 of us in this program, and we were met by a Navy lieutenant who came out in the boat. We were anchored in the stream because they didn't have any docks big enough for this ship. He came out and he found us, and he said to the first guy, you're going to go out to where they're building the air station and see about get in on the help on building the maintenance and servicing of aircraft. To me, he said, you're in communications, and you will be in Hamilton at the headquarters, the temporary headquarters until a base is built. To the third one, he said, you're going to be in charge of the carpool. Well, I won that lottery. And I was then led right into the code room and introduced. There were 3 ensigns covering 24/7. That multiplies out to a lot of hours. There had to be 2 during the day and one came in at 4 o'clock and stayed until 8 o'clock. We had a canvas cot in the code room where you could sleep, if you could sleep on a canvas cot. And they were delighted to see me. And they sat me right down that afternoon at the cryptographic machine known as the ECM. I think it stood for Electric Cipher Machine. And it was a rotor machine. And they showed me how to operate it, how to change the rotors, because we had to change them daily. It's sort of like you heard on the four-wheel Enigma here. There was a basic difference, however, between the two. One, and this is a rather subtle and you wouldn't think a serious difference. The Enigma machine, you pressed the key, the circuit went through what we called a stecker, plug board, that was a German word, to in through the machine, hit the reflector, and come back again. And the letter would light up. This was in the hand machine. They had ones that you could type, but the ones that went aboard submarines and the one that we had, you could carry around. Well, if you stop and think about it, electricity doesn't work in such a way that an A could be enciphered into an A, or a B into a B, etc., because it can't go in and come out the same circuit. It went to a different place, came out a different place. That sounds like a minute handicap of being 1 in 26, and why was that a gap? Well, I learned. I had to stand watch, and I learned about how things were, how to do messages. And about 2 weeks, I was standing watch. And then I was given my first Sunday by myself. Get in at 8 o'clock, or got in at 4 o'clock on Saturday evening. And I was to be there all day Sunday and be relieved at 4 p.m. Well, guess what? This was December 7th, 1941. I think we all know that, what happened in December 7th, 1941. Well, I happened to be in the code room. We had a code room, and then across the way in this rented building, but in Navy speak was the radio shack. It was a room where the operators copied the fleet broadcast, which went on 24 hours a day. They repeated messages quite often, so in case ships missed them. And because we had an awful lot of barely qualified radio operators, they was very slow and easy to copy. And our sailor, white hat, was over there at the typewriter copying the fleet broadcast. It was sort of like this, boom, boom, boom. It was that slow. And I was talking to the other radioman there, and he motioned me over, and there it was, from SINCPAC Fleet to the Chief of Naval Operations, in plain language, that said, air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is no drill. Well, I said, you better take that out of the mill, that Navy speak for typewriter. And he handed it to me, and I took it down to the duty officer, who was the only other officer in the building. And he was a lieutenant commander reserve, but he was very ponderous, slow to move. He scratched his non-existent beard for a couple of minutes and shook his head. And just then the operator came down with the next message, also plain language, from CNO to all NAV, CNO to the whole Navy. Execute WPL 46 against Japan. Of course, I had no idea what WPL 46 was, but the operations officer did. And he said, that is all-out war. Those are the orders. So we started to call people, and from the commandant to most of the officers. They came down, of course, wanted to know more. We didn't know any more. And we couldn't do anything, of course. Bermuda, Pearl Harbor was the other side of the world. But it was a big deal, obviously. We'd been sort of at a submarine war before, but it was undeclared and not formal. But we knew things were going to change, and they did. We were staying not a hardship place. Temporarily, we were without families. I didn't have a family or a wife. At the Elbow Beach Hotel, which was hardly roughing it, we did have a special dining area. The PGs, as we call them, ate over on the other side. PG, paying guest. At the other side, we had a fixed menu in our Navy group. But that was a big night, December 7th. A couple cruisers had put in some wives, junior officers' wives, people without families, had flown down to have 2 or 3 days holiday, and everybody was in an uproar. Well, that's enough of that, but it changed our whole psyche. It changed everything. And we began to build up. We got more officers. We got the first, we went for about a year building up. And after about a year, I'd been there about a year, our senior, he was a lieutenant junior grade, he was sent back to sea. And the 2 others who were senior to me, we had gotten 3 in that were junior to me. They gradually, one after another, got their orders out, leaving me as senior in the code room. And then we moved out to the air station to a brand new building and much better quarters. We had plenty of personnel. We even had a yeoman, and although he could not legally operate the cryptographic devices, but he could sure type them up. And it was changed entirely. Well, I got to worrying. Here I am with a designator of AVS, I guess it was, Aeronautics Volunteer Special. The special meant not qualified for sea duty. It didn't mean it, you were special. And we'd gotten a bunch of new ensigns, and I was the head man, and I was working days, and I thought, wow, my time is pretty near up. It was coming up, it was a year and a half or so, and the ensigns before me had all disappeared one after another in about 2 years' time. I thought, my time is coming up, and here I am with an aviation designator. So I read a letter to the Bureau of Naval Personnel, and I was advised by my seniors that when you wrote a letter to BUPERS, Navy speak for Bureau of Naval Personnel, why you listed all of your assets and then suggested the next duty that you should have. So I told them about my master's degree in mathematics and this, and that I would like a tour of duty in an advanced base in communications, and I would like my designator to be CVS. Well, I didn't hear anything for a week or two, and then I got message orders. We had never gotten message orders for any ensigns or JGs or lieutenants, and that I was to report to the Chief of Naval Operations. Wow, what was this going to be? Well, in communications. So they gave me 10 days delay to count as leave. So I had my holiday, spend all the time worrying about what was going to happen. And I reported to the Director of Naval Communications, and they looked me up and said, "Oh, you're going to be out at the annex." I said, "Yeah, the annex. Where this?" And so I went out, and then I with all the folderol there is of paperwork, I was led into where they were breaking the German naval enigma. And I was sat down, and I was shown how it worked. And I was excited, thrilled, and we had the bombs, as you heard about, the four-wheel bombs. We had them. You had to have a crib, and we had various cribs. Re-encipherments were great, because if you had the plain text from a previous day and it appeared again, and you could recognize these things. How did you recognize or place a long crib? You placed it by finding that no letter went to itself. Now you start taking 25, 26 probability, keep multiplying it, and you'll find that it's practically impossible for a whole page without what we called a crash. That is, an A going to an A C going to a C. So we knew we had the plain text. This was very helpful when the Germans changed their system. Anyway, my red light flashed, so I'll get on to the next phase. I could talk forever on this subject. It was fascinating. Couldn't wait to get back to work. We had a 6-day week, and I did manage to get 7 days leave in January of 1944, and I took advantage of this. I was got my day off added to it, and I went up to Dobbs Ferry, New York, and I got married to my best girlfriend. and then came back. I signed out on leave, and we went on our honeymoon. My best girlfriend is still right here in the audience after 63 years. Well, anyway, I went right back to work and kept going on this. I went to, at the end of the war, there was a symposium on computers, or some lectures. I had been designated. There wasn't any Enigma problem anymore. And I was in the R&D, and somehow I got assigned to liaison with the Office of Naval Research. So I went down there, and being mathematical rather than electronics, why I made my connections more with the math department there. And I learned about the new development in computers. And this sounded pretty good. And so I told the folks at NSA about, or the Navy, about this. This was Navy actually still. And then I went away on leave to show off my new 1-year-old daughter to her grandparents, such. And while I was there, I got a telephone call from another lieutenant commander, which I was by this time. Actually, he was a little junior to me. And he said, Captain Wenger wants you to go to this course. Captain Wenger was the big boss in computers. I had advised them that this was going to happen. And I said, well, I'm on leave. And he said, the captain wants you to go to this course. Well, I got the clue. So I went, cut short our visit, drove back, and went down to the Moore School of Electrical Engineering at University of Pennsylvania. And I was told that I could find space in the dorms. Well, I didn't want, it was something like 4 or 6 weeks. I can't remember which. I think it was 4. My wife thinks it was 6, so we'll say it was 6. And I got off the train, and university was right near fairly near the station, where the Moore School. And I started looking around for the dorms, when I ran into a sailor who had been on my watch in the Enigma problem. He had gotten out of, this is the end of the war, 46, and was on the GI Bill at the University of Pennsylvania. And I said, well, can you tell me where the doors? His name was Whitey Taylor. He and I, he was been on my watch, and we knew each other. And I asked him about this, and he said, well, our fraternity is 3/4 empty. This is summer. And he said, I'm here trying to catch up on my 5 semesters on the GI Bill. And he said, you can stay at the fraternity house. Well, this sounded pretty good. And I said, sure, what's the fee? He said, oh, it's free. We got all sorts of beds. So I lucked out there. I went to the course, and Oh, we heard about the 13,000 vacuum tubes in the ENIAC, and we had lectures from the great Jon von Neumann, probably the greatest mathematician of the century, on how to solve the weather problem, how to get numerical solutions to the weather problem, partial differential equation, numerical solutions. And we heard some on the electronics. And then we heard a lecture by John Mauchly. The Eckert and Mauchly were the two professors at the University of Pennsylvania who were behind the ENIAC. And he told us about the new idea in programming. This was absolutely new. I've been accustomed to machines that you plugged up and you fed information in a fixed way. But this was a program that you told the machine what to do. And there was an argument about it, what kind of a program you should use. The only problem was that nobody had invented a memory, because this depended upon a high-speed memory. But RCA was working on a special tube for this, and we went ahead on this, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that given these programming lectures we had, Herman Goldstein from the Institute for Advanced Study also gave us a lecture on programming. And it occurred to me that this was perfect for solving cryptanalytic problems. You could do anything. You could use the same machine. We had our bombs. You heard about the four-wheel Enigma bombs that we use, bomba in Polish. And here was a perfect cryptanalytic machine because you could program it to do all sorts of things. And so I wrote a paper, and I made up a coding system and coded a couple of problems. Of course, this was all theoretical. And I wrote the paper and submitted it. And that's the paper that I am most noted for now. How many years later? 61 years later. Because it caught fire. Howie Campaign, head of mathematical research, was wildly enthusiastic. And Joe Ickes, who was the head machine man, who was a mathematician, not an electronics man, he got busy. And we had a memory system. We had a magnetic drum. It wasn't electronic, but it went pretty fast, and we decided we ought to go ahead and have a digital computer made. We had a company who made things for us, a number of alumni of Nebraska Avenue, and so we were going to start. And at least the idea was to get started with this magnetic drum, and then we could replace it with the purely electronic. Somebody also then came up with a bright idea, because half of your instructions are simply to get something from the memory, get something else from the memory, and then operate on those two items. And somebody said, well, you know, if we figure out how long these electronic items take, then we could put the next order down. So if you have 4,096, which is a nice factor of 2, you could then do every fourth one or every eighth one, and you'd be ready to do the next operation. That was a nice breakthrough. We'd get better speed. And a little bit later, we decided, and we actually had let the contract with this ERA, which really was formed by alumni from our organization. And so we started, so we were very early. And this paper I wrote saying that the digital computer was the greatest invention since whatever, the wheel or whatever. That's what I became known for. And I did hang around for a long time. I had to go off to be officer in charge of an intercept station. You know, you can't break foreign traffic unless you have it in hand. So we had to have our stations out, located strategically to collect messages. And I had to have experience in that. But I'd gotten enough people enthusiastic, and more so, I guess, than I. And that's where I'm ending in my saga. I'm still around. I'm still interested. I lost my clearance some time ago. I mean, you retire and you lose your clearance. However, I have a son who's now a senior at the agency, and his daughter, who is also a PhD in mathematics. She's also had some exposure. She's still teaching in a university, but anyway. So if there's time afterwards for questions and answers, why, I'd be glad to discuss it.